Hello, Ed 355, and this is week 2, so welcome to week 2. I feel like week 1 was kind of a crazy busy week for everyone, and week 2 kind of went into the same pattern. So I wanted to just send this number 1 and say I apologize that I am a couple days late. I sent an email to one of you that just said, honestly, the week got away from me, and we had a couple of pretty big things that came down from the top here at Campbell. So I've been working on those, but my apologies still for not having this out for you. But I've also been talking to a couple of you about just life happening. And so I understand that. And I want to make sure that I'm supporting you through this process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up all of the assignments. I will still introduce them weekly, but I will extend their due dates until Friday, December 8th. So that is the last possible day that any work can be turned in to where I can still get things graded for your final grade, because my grades are due that next Monday morning. So I will still continue to roll things out a week at a time. I will still continue to recommend that things are due that Sunday at 11:59. But if life is happening and you're not able to get it finished, you are always welcome to turn things in after that time. And typically, if things are turned in after the due date, there's a 2-point per day late deduction. But we are busy people, and so I do want to understand and support you through everything going on right now. So all that to say, I will still roll things out weekly. They'll still be technically due Sunday at 11:59, but if you can't get them in and you need an extension, that's fine. Longest, worst case scenario, turn things in by Friday, December 8th. Absolutely no later than that. I can't do that. So let's get into what we need to work on and talk about for week 2. So here is our home screen, and if we get into our syllabus here, you can see that, there we go. You can see that week 2 has us talking about some descriptive writing and writing strategies to develop strategic writers in the classroom. So we are kind of combining 2 chapters. We're going to be working through chapter 2 and chapter 6 this week, and we have our 3 learning outcomes, which are connected to our 3 tasks over here. So the first thing we're going to do this week is to be able to identify and define writing strategies to develop strategic writers in the classroom, and that directly connects to chapter 2. And then we're going to relate instructional procedures to current classroom placement. So also in chapter 2, we talk about some instructional procedures, some best practices that happen as we're writing teachers, as we're teaching writing. And your discussion board relates to that. So we'll take a peek at that discussion board prompt. And then your third learning outcome is to demonstrate strategic writing skills through a descriptive writing piece. So chapter 6 comes in here, and chapter 6 is about descriptive writing, but it's connecting to chapter 2 through those writing strategies that we're going to talk about. We're going to be adding a little bit more to our interactive notebook. You have your discussion board and then your student writing piece. So let's go ahead and take a look at our weekly content here. I'm going to go into week 2. Okay, so your discussion board prompt right here, again, connects to some of the content in chapter 2. So in chapter 2, we learn about critical instructional procedure known as scaffolding for writing. So scaffolding doesn't just happen in writing, it happens across all content areas, but it's critical in any content area, but in writing, we really want to be able to scaffold our instruction to meet the diverse needs of the learners in our classroom. We have to be able to individualize our instruction and to meet the students where they are and build them up to that next step. So in your discussion board, you have 3 items to talk about. 1, what does it mean to scaffold instruction for writers? 2, what are the 4 levels of support when scaffolding? So there's, depending on where the students are and what their needs are, there's levels that you kind of enter into scaffolding. So what are those 4 levels? And then number 3, how have you seen this practice implemented in your classroom? And if you haven't, how would you plan to use it as a teacher? It is definitely a high yield instructional strategy because you are focusing and individualizing your instruction to meet student needs. So what does it mean? What are the levels of support? Have you seen it in your classroom? And if not, how would you use it? So it's not something that's incredibly difficult, the concept of scaffolding itself, but it's kind of difficult to manage. So a lot of teachers honestly just don't do this, but it's a critical piece to be able to move our students forward in writing and in anything. So that is your discussion board that you will enter. Remember that you are going to post your initial comments and then you reply to each colleague's post, okay? So connecting into Chapter 2, our interactive notebook. So our rubric here, this is the same rubric that was uploaded into week 1. It will be uploaded into each week where you have an additional entry into your interactive notebook. So for strategic writers, this is where we're going to be focusing on this week. So writing strategies is defined. So what does that mean? All 12 strategies are identified. All 12 strategies are defined. All 12 strategies are represented with some sort of visual image. And all 4 self-regulating strategies are identified. So if you all are in Chapter 2, at the bottom of page 34 and 35, here we are, it gives you a wonderful reference, figure 2.1, that talks about the writing strategies. They're all listed there. So you have to identify all 12, define all 12, visually represent them somehow, some sort of image that your students would be able to connect to those strategies. But then 4 of those 12 strategies are self-regulating strategies. The students have to be on top of their writing process and on top of their writing because this is really something that they have to be doing themselves. So what are those 4? Somehow you have to identify those. In the textbook, they're identified with a little asterisk. So how are you going to identify them in your interactive notebook? So that is your rubric piece. That's what we're looking for. And then I'm going to go really quick into week 1 just so that I can pull up your interactive notebook. So this is going to take you to mine, which is still just the template because I really don't want to kind of narrow your thought process. If I put an example up here, I don't want you to kind of like get narrowed into what I have here. So you guys completed the writing process, and then this is where you're going to develop strategic writers. So there is only 1 page here dedicated to developing strategic writers, but with 12 strategies that you're going to be putting in, I would find it very hard to believe that you would only need 1 page. So you'll be copying and pasting and adding more pages in order to meet the needs of however you're designing your interactive notebook. So also keep in mind that in your table of contents, so some of you guys, when you were creating your notebook for the writing process, you needed more than 1 slide. So your table of contents needs to match that. So your writing process might be slide 3 through 8, and then your developing strategic writers might actually start on slide 9. So you guys are going to have different table of contents depending on what pages you're doing, how many pages or slides you're doing for each of the entries. So there's not a minimum, just whatever your need is to be able to enter that information in. All right, so let me go back to week 2. And I will just speak for a second to your descriptive writing piece. So your descriptive writing piece, the descriptive writing process is specified in Chapter 6. So if you look at the descriptive writing rubric, so you are going to use at least 2 of the strategies. Okay, so we're connecting our Chapter 2. So on page 34 and 35, figure 2.1, you're going to take 2 of those strategies, at least 2, and use those as you write a descriptive writing piece. So writing descriptively is supported through 5 techniques. If you, when you get to chapter 6, it takes you through and it lists for you, I know you can't really see this, but it lists for you the techniques that you are going to be using. So technique 1, and then it has 2, 3, 4, and 5. So those techniques are specific information, word choice, sensory images, figurative language, and dialogue. So again, you can submit this any way that you think, meets that criteria. So an example or one way that you might do it is that you're getting into Microsoft Word or Google Docs or however you want to write it, and you write your descriptive writing piece using those 5 techniques to write your best piece. And then maybe that takes 3 pages. So then on the 4th page, you're going to add another piece that's not your descriptive writing piece, but is kind of a follow-up to say, here are the 2 strategic writing strategies that I used, because those strategic writing strategies are mostly strategies that you're not going to see on the paper. When you're editing and revising, like in the writing process, you can see those marks and those edits on the pages. The writing strategies you may or may not see on the page. So you'll probably need an additional written piece to just kind of say, these are the 2 strategies that I used, and this is what I did. So the topic of your writing piece is anything that you choose, so get creative. Use this as a place to vent. I'm the only person that's going to see these, so use this for whatever you need it for. But this is your piece, so this is not something that you would write from the perspective of a student. It is your piece. So for each of the criteria in the rubric, you either have it or you don't. This will be the same pretty much for each of the writing pieces that you will do. So descriptive writing, again, there are 5 techniques. So you are showing the evidence of those 5 techniques. If you feel like you may need to offer some sort of clarification on where those are or how you use those 5 techniques in your descriptive writing piece, add that into your extra reflection at the end. You also need to have evidence of at least 2 of the strategic writing strategies. So I've listed them all here, but you only have to have 2. And again, if there is no evidence because you're not marking up the page of those 2 strategies, then you need to add that to your reflection. And then so down here at the bottom, reflection of additional information. I have it divided into 2 separate categories. So your reflection or additional writing piece at the end of your descriptive writing explains any of the descriptive writing techniques that may not have been identifiable within the writing piece. If you feel like it is very obvious what all 5 techniques are in your descriptive writing piece, and you don't add that into your reflection, if I can tell all 5 techniques, that's fine, you'll get those 5 points. But if I'm not seeing those 5 techniques and you don't reflect on that at the end, then you'll be losing points here for not having the 5 techniques and here for not explaining them. So just kind of a FYI. And then also reflection, additional information on the strategies that you chose to use. So again, if you feel like the 2 strategies that you chose are very evident, then that's fine. But if I'm not able to identify this is monitoring or this is questioning, then if I can't identify it here and you don't add it to your reflection, then you're going to be missing points in both of those categories. And then the writing itself is grammatically correct, it's easy to read, it does not have distracting errors. So it's not that it can't have any errors, but I need to be able to read your descriptive writing piece without having to kind of struggle to get through it because of errors. So that is week 2 in a nutshell. I will again recommend that these things are due by Sunday at 11:59, but I will leave your Turnitin links open until December 8th, that Friday. And also know that your interactive notebook, as you're adding things to your interactive notebook, it's a Google Slides presentation. So as you edit, I see those edits and those updates. So you don't have to reshare it with me, but you will be editing that same file that you already sent to me and shared to me. All right, so that's it for week 2. I apologize again for being late this video, but if you have any questions or any needs, please feel free to give me a call or an email. I appreciate all the work that you're doing. So thank you very much. I hope your week is going well, and I will see you again next week.